geluba naqdoogliyo nugal waa ku darara melay nabadi joogta.
Welcome to ISIRKA. My name's Amina Isir, and join me as I take you on a journey to explore identity, culture, and belonging. Take a seat as I take you through time, space, and various perspectives of cultural identity. Stay tuned to see where the journey will take us today. All right, hello, welcome back to another episode of ISIRKA. This is the next episode in the Ragga Dambe series. And so when I started off the first episode last time about Sharma Boy, I just really kind of went into it and went to talking about Sharma Boy and Kainan. In the beginning, I talked about Kainan and how he was the only Somali artist that we kind of had that was palatable to mainstream audiences. And so Manta, I'm just going to kind of continue talking about the both of them. But before I get there, I'd like to really kind of give a little background to the purpose and the reasoning behind this Ragga Dambe series. And I came up with this idea actually last year. I was watching Khalid Keo a lot during quarantine, and I was just like kind of watching like a lot of when we talk about Somali music and Somali artistry, we always think of like these like, I think women and men might kind of be equal in some ways, but I feel like the men still at the end of the day are like the heavyweights. They're the abwanin, they're the ones who are writing the songs. So like the male artists in some ways, like Malagari Karo, you had Hassan Ahmed Samatar, you had Umar Dula Lana Harista, you had Tuba', you had Ahmed Moge, Mohammed Moge Lana Harista, and Todordan. And like they're the goats when it comes to Somali music, you know? And so women artists really did shine during that time, but men, the male artists, you know, are kind of like still considered like the goats. I think like Hassan Ahmed Samatar and the Moge brothers, like the goats of Somali music. And I was just thinking about how, now with modernization and the youth and the way in which the youth is expressing themselves and understanding themselves a lot is different than like how like, and by the youth I mean like younger artists or like contemporary artists today, how they're caring about their artistry and funka is very different than the previous generation. And so the previous generation, like everything after independence to kind of before Burburki was like the golden era, right? Like, and a lot of those artists, some might still be alive today. We have footage of them in their heyday, of them performing across the world or in Somalia. And that was like this golden era where and people always talk about it, you know, they always lament for the past that doesn't exist anymore, you know, like the artists, they were something, you know, they used to have to take tests to have to prove their skill set. And now it's like, and now we just listen to auto-tune and, you know, people are just lip singing as they're performing for us. What happened to art? What happened to the artistry? And I think also it's interesting that we come from this culture that is so nomadic, that is so focused on being this other type of tough person. Like when you look at like the nomadic pastoralists and stuff like that, and there's this sense of you have to be so tough. I think I mentioned last episode that Hadrawi talked about when he was 4, he couldn't cry when he because they told him he was a man and he was a gil chire, you know, when he was younger. And I literally was like, wow, you know? And that's like, imagine how we went from a people that kind of operated like that. And so Ragga Dambe, although I'm focusing on contemporary male artists today, honestly, Ragga Dambe is kind of talking about the ways in which also Somali livelihood and forms of expression and vulnerability have changed in some ways as we've gone from our roots of being nomads to then coming into the city, dealing with modernization. And so when Somali music even came about, you know, like Abdi Cinema and Belwo and stuff like that, it was 1943. So it was right on the eve of World War II. And the world is changing at that time. You know, I'm sure there were Somalis in the north that were fighting alongside the British in World War II. And then as we kind of go into decolonization and fighting for independence, then music also was a big part of how to rally the people, how to express how the society is feeling and things like that. And so music then became a huge part of all aspects of state building, of like, you know, kind of shaping what society's conscious is. And the emphasis on even like Belwo was a song where he was lamenting and expressing frustration and pain and sorrow. And so I think it's interesting that that's how music started, and in a Somali context. And when we talk about music across the board, music is definitely like, it's all always about feelings. Like music is another way of either like expressing something that you're feeling, or like, you know, when you're in various moods, there's various songs or music that you listen to that just kind of understand, like they just capture the mood. And it's not something that you have to then go talk to somebody personally, but it still is something that, you know, like, you know, it's all about the feelings. It's all about the feels. And so the emphasis on that, on Ragga Dambe, is that, okay, let's look at what Somali male artistry looks like. Because if that's the one space where they could be vulnerable, where they could talk about their feelings, and that also has given them that space in the same way that it very much gave women. You know, Khadra Tahir said that she became a singer to express herself. And that and focusing on Ragga Dambe is also just like a cool way to also then kind of explore that as well. I've been talking a lot about the ladies that came before us. And I think that it's important to also highlight creatives. It's important to highlight artists. So it won't just be musicians. It'll be writers. It'll be various creatives, photographers, storytellers. It'll really focus on who is this person? You know, what is their story, and what is the art form that they're doing, and how are they trying to shape the masses in ways that might be palatable to us in this day and age, ways that might not be. But it'll still be, you know, another way to kind of put a lens on society, the arts, and self-expression. So I'm kind of leaving Ragga Dambe to be open. It's anything after, you know, statehood, anything after 1943, whatever artists came out and things like that. Because I think for me, there's a link in some ways as between modernization, development, globalization, and how music came about. You know, there are people in the me that sing, there are people or sing songs rather as they're working and things like that. But there's something so interesting that music became such a huge focal part of our society as we were kind of on the eve of independence, and building a state. You know, and especially during Dawlat Siad Barre, like the fact that there was so much emphasis and money and all of these things put into the arts to really at least have everyone like gel together, even though there probably weren't too many reasons why people might come together, or, you know, like geographically, ideologically, and things like that. But that was like one space that was at least like a societal space, and that was like the heyday of what we've seen Somali arts and culture, because we've seen so many things come out of that time. Granted, he did rule the country longer than anybody else, but it still is something that we have music now. We have artists now, which is not centralized in the same way. There's not a nucleus, but there's a lot of people doing really cool, interesting things. So in this Ragga Dambe series, we'll kind of continue, you know, looking at various artists and what they're doing and what they're producing. And so I will do another episode about Khalid Keo. I wanted the second one to be about him, but Sharma Boy and Kanan came out this week with a new song. And I actually was thinking about doing a Ragga Dambe series on Kanan. For me personally, Kanan was like the first Somali artist that kind of spoke in Somali that I would listen to in a way that I didn't feel like I was being transported to like everything that my parents listened to. He still would like rap about the Somali immigrant experience coming to North America. he came to New York. And I think it's also cool, like, he learned English from listening to rap music. And so, like, and probably not rap music, but hip-hop. Like, hip-hop in its, like, early b-boy days when it was still, like, a form of poetry. And it was more focused on, like, the lyrical wit and, like, you know, dope beats and things like that. And then he became a rapper. And if he stayed back home or if he stayed in Somalia or within a Somali societal context, he probably would have been a griot or a storyteller or a buad or somebody that just like Sugat like became such a renowned storyteller. Maybe like, and his Sugans would have been like known everywhere, but we have him in the diaspora, and so he's still kind of continuing that same story of or that same tradition of storytelling in a very culturally rooted way to the masses. He basically brought that Somali soul to Western music. And for me, as somebody who was born and raised in the States and had never seen Somalia and didn't know what that soul of home felt like, as a teenager growing up, Kanan really gave me that soul of home. The first album, The Dusty Foot Philosopher, and the second album, Troubadour, I think but particularly the first one, The Dusty Foot Philosopher, he really in like the dopest way, because like he had like all studio equipment, everything sounded really fresh, like it worked so well together. Like sometimes when you listen to old Somali songs, the quality is kind of outdated, so it sounds like fuzzy on top of everything. But because he recorded in like, you know, the West and in the studio and stuff like that, everything is so clean. And so it's like when the song starts and then you hear like the drums or like the beat, and then his voice comes in after the beat has dropped, and all of these different elements together just work together so perfectly, and it really hits on how he's trying to deliver the song, really. But for me, it was like, how is he trying to deliver like little pieces of Somalia still? And it's very much like he was still holding on to what he knew. He was still holding on to the elements of what we were in the most harshest time, honestly. Like, he dropped his first album 2005, 2007. It was like, okay, the war is not going, the country hasn't really settled like that yet. We're still waiting to have a federal government that's recognized. And he was so ahead of the time, honestly, in a lot of what he was doing. But I think that we were still, I don't think people were really ready for him in the same way. But now looking back on it and listening to it, and I forget that that's all I had. That's all I had access to, you know, to like Somali music. And so until the lion learns to speak, for example, the blues for the horn, like the sax of the trumpets and the music, like the instruments in the background are like so nice. I think honestly, they gave this sense of Somalia that was like, it was this place where it was like, everything was like copacetic, but there was still a lot of longing, and there was still like, but because of how, like, he was just coolin', you know, like with little, like his music has like a folk twist to it, and it was just like, it was still like good vibes, like you're just calm and staying, you're really like kind of brought into the song and how he's telling you the story and bringing you to this place that when I went to Somalia now, I was like, oh, this was not like the kind of Somalia that like it's not the same kind of Somalia that he was presenting, in the sense of that when I went to Somalia, I felt like it's hectic, it's jam, while like you have to go boom boom boom, there's so many things happening. I wanted that Somalia that he had, which is not like what exists in the cities, I guess. But like one time there was a moment where I went on this road trip, and then we were outside of Hargeisa, like maybe like 20-30 minutes outside of Hargeisa, and we stopped in this small town, and we were shahba apine, like there was like a tea shack, and then you could buy like some fizzy drinks and stuff like that, and then you just heard the radio playing, and then you just heard Karami music. And I was like, and it was just us. It was like really empty space. It was quiet. We were outside of the city. So you were able to really like also hear the sounds around you. Like you could see the stars. Like you were able to really take in your full environment. But when I was in the city, I didn't have time to do any of that. So I guess in some ways maybe that he was also kind of talking about, or kind of capturing a life that was outside of the cities. But these are my blues for the horn. These are my blues for the horn, for the horn. And then when he did Hobale, Obede, Hobale, that was Hobale is also a banger. So Dusty Foot Philosopher was Somalia. Like, it was welcome. He was coming to America and really telling you about Somalia, the Somalia that he left. That was like in the middle of civil war and, you know, like a really kind of rough social situation. But he still had typical elements. He had the typical elements of Somali culture, of home, of how we express ourselves, like verbally and culturally. And so it was still astute and still in his music, in like the realist way. Troubadour was a little bit more, his artistry had grown and you can see the difference, but then he wasn't like hardcore rap. You could see like it was a little bit more calm, a little bit more folky, and Waving Flag was on that. Waving Flag, like, you know, took him to the World Cup in 2010. And then Somalia, I think Somalia was also kind of like, he was like, all right, this is where I came from. This is what it is. And it's kind of going to be like that. You know, I feel like Somalia was his way of just kind of saying like, you know, he still wanted to put some respect on Somalia's name. But it still was like Somalia was always going to be painful and heartbreaking. And then when he did America with Mos Def and another artist, America was like, he had, I still remember he was singing like, at the end, he was singing in Somali, or actually in the beginning. And it was like probably like little like kind of raps that like kids used to spit on the block and stuff. But it was so dope to hear that in a song. And it was like the most Somali, like typical in the most Somalia sense. Like, Nahoy Semseme, Sabah Noore, Aba Kilkei. And then to have Mos Def also rap on the song with Somali was like, that was validation for us, the Somali American kids. We were like, oh, we made it. Like, if Mos Def is on a song with a Somali, then we are going to own, and we've been represented, and we're going to own both. We're going to own both cultures and societies. Fatima, I'm in America. I make songs and I make it delicate. You would have liked the parks in Connecticut. You would have said, I'm working too hard again. Fatima was also really sad, but as you know, somebody lives in Connecticut, you know, we had some representation. So Kanan was like, and I think that album, Troubadour, he said the last time he was going to speak about Somalia. And so then he dropped another album after that, Country God or the Girl. But, and that was in 2012. I also have to say a special shout out to Kanan's, I like the collaboration with Nas and Damian Marley. They did a couple songs on Distant Relatives, and that's such a cool Pan-African mix to have all these different like prominent voices and people and like lyricists all together. And Damian Marley and Nas are a couple of my favorite artists as well. And so I say all of that to say that Manta in 2021, September 19, 2021, Kanan, like, this is very dope. It was very dope of him to do this. After, in the last podcast episode, I mentioned Kanan as one of the first Somali artists that I grew up on, or that we had. And then I talked about Sharma Boy. And then Sharma Boy, his last song, Shar'i Gabara, Usorda Afe Alam Tara. He said that he was basically going to be the new artist, and he was taking over for Kanan's spot, you know, to make it, to be like the most like popular mainstream Somali artist, you know, and he said it with his whole chest. And then today, him and Kanan dropped the song Waayo Waayo, and I think Sharma Boy is in Zambia, and then Kanan shot his in New York. And Kanan's also, you know, Kanan still loves Somalia. Yeah, at the end of the day, like, is never going to leave him or represent. He has, like, a blue bandana on, like the sky blue bandana. And then he's wearing Daily Paper. Is this brand of some, they're Dutch, like they're from the Netherlands. But one of the owners is Somali, or one of the people on the team is Somali. So they have a Daily Paper sweater that's a Somalia version that's white and blue. And so he's wearing that while he's in New York. And then Sharma Boy is in Zambia. And then it goes back and forth. And the visuals are beautiful. I think it's also like Kanan was like, oh, legends take time. And I was going to come back. And it also goes to show his growth in a way. Like now he's literally like he's thinking about himself and the future and like trying to be better for himself before he can come back to art and things like that. He's in New York, like one of the best cities in the world. And whereas before he had done some music videos like in Kenya and Nairobi and things like that. And Sharma Boys in Africa, and then sunsets don't really look the same way as they do on the continent. And then it goes back and forth between the two, Sharma Boys rapping in Somali and he's singing. And also the biggest thing, Sharma Boys had really dope beats the past couple of songs, and I don't know if this might have been Kanan, but Kanan's beats, like that I mentioned earlier, that were really kind of like took you into like this calm, like folky type of vibe, really came through in this. Actually, the beat maker was DJ Adam and Hargeisa. So, okay, look at all of the Somali Nimo that's like surpassing all these boundaries, yeah? So, the beat, like the dude who like made the beat and the music and lahanka and stuff is DJ Adam. He was based in Hargeisa. And then Sharma Boys in Zambia, and he put his vocals on it. And then he's rapping and like kind of like sing-songing in Somali. Kanan was rapping in English, but at one point they're rapping together in Somali. And then the part that I like, I'm going to include right now, because I think the one part, what Kanan always gave us was he told us about the pain and the loss and the devastation of Somalia, but also the stories of people, and it was always like still put some respect and dignity on our existence. And then him and Sharma Boy, they literally they kind of did that together as well.
Yeah, I never listen to them, I just envision through them. Treat them like prison food, I'm running on my missions through them. They thought I had a limit, but then I went and did it, and now they won't admit it. Legends always take a minute, that's just a short pause while I'm growing like a farmer. Enemies better count on me to roll up for my nigga Sharma. I got my share of blame, all the pain that built my armor. There's one thing we don't need, cause we OD don't know that drama.
And then I think also to say, or also to show that like Sharma Boy's kind of, he's at the beginning stages of him kind of like making it, quote unquote, or like getting to that stage of Nimo. And the fact that they're like two different generations, but they're still able to kind of come together and collaborate on this song and still give space for each other and represent and come together really is like very, very amazing to see. And it's very cool to see because it's also showing how we are still people that are still all connected, you know? Like, Kanan really could have just gone about his life, but this is like something we just have never expected. It also then, and it validates Sharma Boy's existence in a sense of he's a young boy that's growing up in the country within this context that Kanan left. He didn't have this experience, right? And he's even speaking about on this song, like, oh, and he's even giving advice to young people, you know? He's like, do this and this and this and this. And also speaking about the reality still, even in this song about young people living in Somalia who are trying to leave to go to Europe and things like that. And I love that fact that it still is an advice song, and it still is like, because that the only time we're going to be able to come together as people and make a change is if we come together, listen to each other, and also give space for everyone to share their perspectives and their narratives. And so this episode of Ragga Dambe, it was exclusively focused on Kanan and his song with Sharma Boy, Waayo. Inshallah, stay tuned to the next couple of episodes on Ragga Dambe. Stay tuned to ISIRKA. And if you are not following on Instagram, ISIRKA is on Instagram _ISIRKA. I also manage another Instagram page focused only on Somali music. So you can see what I'm listening to or what I'm really liking these days. And you can follow that page on ISIRKA Music. You can feel free to let me know on Instagram. Like, you can send DMs. Let me know what you think, how you feel about Ragga Dambe. What are your thoughts on these artists? Who would you like to see? If you also would even like to kind of come on and we can kind of discuss other artists or people or things like that, feel free to shoot me any suggestions. You can find me on Instagram on _ISIRKA. Leave me a comment. Leave me some feedback on the blog ISIRKA.com, and inshallah stay tuned to the next episode of ISIRKA.
Ku kala naqrono, meel wana